the conversation. My goodness, I think.
I do have quite a few questions.
Yeah, do you want to? How about if you kick off with some questions and then?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's open to everyone. Please raise your hand if you want to ask questions. Is conducted in a fairly informal way. But my question, when I saw Alan's presentation, it felt a lot. And I used to live in King's Cross, and I work in two of the large projects in King's Cross, actually with Pablo. But I used to live there when I was doing my master's in architecture, and I can see how it has been transformed. There was an element on your presentation about missed opportunities, and I just wonder what you have to say about that, if this is something measurable, and if it's something that it should be captured to inform how we go about design, and how this is used to measure project success.
Yes, this is a key question in a way. How we I think the conversation, the last presentation was interesting because it is a circulation of value in a way, so, which is very a different approach how we see it. Well, at this stage, the question in a way was more related to what the question of how do we evaluate option, and sometimes how, because I mean in a term of design process, I would say there's two side of it, which is like generating variation, which is mainly, I mean, maybe a slight variation around something, versus kind of generating very distinctive options, which, because they are distinctive in principle, are difficult to compare. And at the same time, the goal of exploring distinctive options is to be able to compare them. So that's a bit of paradox of that process of designing. Once you are in a kind of more like in a more preferred option stage, I think this becomes more what is called variation and tweaking in a way. And again, I mean, how do we track value change along those two processes? So that's and what kind of distance do we use? So because that's a bit the question. At the end of the day, we measure the kind of difference, and we evaluate as well their value. So that's kind of raised a lot of questions. And whether it's a limited, a missed opportunity, sometimes you have a sense of it, but I mean, I mean, in that sense, it's like when you see the foster scheme and you say, was it a missed opportunity, or did we get something better at the end of the day?
Yeah.
It seems that the King's Cross example is an example of it being done well. I guess in my mind, I'm drawing a line between look at what's happening with Canary Wharf, for example. So Canary Wharf's been sort of somewhere down the line in terms of maturity of a developer-led space. You know, it's sort of slowly becoming less commercial, becoming more residential. How resilient? Yeah, how do you create adaptability? I guess I don't know if it's adaptability or resilience, the sort of the same side of the sort of two sides of the same coin, but it's the it might be seen to be successful now, but will it be successful in the future?
Yeah, that's an important question. Difference between the location and the kind of like views that are around the embeddedness of I would say King's Cross versus relatively separation of or Canary Wharf in a way. The model, yeah. But, it was interesting because I recently went and then visit both the city, Canary Wharf, and King's Cross in a kind of like almost like in the same day, and the difference of feel is quite amazing in the sense. But the location as well are very different. I mean, the King's Cross has a what I mentioned is not only embedded in in this neighborhood, but it's embedded in the wide context of London in a better way than Canary Wharf, and is embedded as well through kind of like a Eurostar in a European context. So I would say, yeah, it might kind of go up and down like any area, but and Canary Wharf has been up and down as well in a big way before. For example, Jubilee Line was kind of like they went bankrupt and so on, and now as you say, there's a kind of like a cycle as well about whether that kind of place has to change. Interesting to see where it will go. But can we predict the future? Probably to that scale, is an interesting question.
Yeah, it depends how good your data is and your information. It's certainly a challenge. Yeah. Neil and Hans, of course, we loved your presentations. So I have a question in respect to what you presented. That you said that computational design is it's about utility, and I was just thinking, it is really about utility, or is it about that information asymmetry or symmetry, creating information symmetry when you look at larger scales, if you're talking about microeconomics or interaction design, like risk and prospect theory, for example, or mechanism design. And is that information symmetry or asymmetry over finite time, like what you would call in game theory finite horizon, imperfect and incomplete games of interaction. So you see computational design as something that is about utility creation, or also there's information symmetry problem?
That's a good question. So for me, it's about a fundamental general misunderstanding of the capability of technology. So we get this sort of predictability of the future that technology is supposed to bring us, and it's not, for me, it's not about that predictability of the future. It's about the adaptability of the information you've got to make an action right now. So because of sort of the division of labor and the cascade of contracts that come together to deliver anything, creates this massive asymmetric information problem. And if we look at sort of some of the basis of building information modeling, there's this sort of underlying altruism required for it to work. And unfortunately, as much as we'd like to be in a society where altruism can be incentivized, unfortunately, the money talks at the end of the day. So it's finding ways of being able to wrap commercial models around who owns the information to enable to break down the barriers of these asymmetric information problems that we have. I think in terms of sort of computational design, the other way I see it is we have X amount of time available to make a decision. And back to my point in the presentation of the technology wasn't there for us to make a comprehensive decision with the information that we've got. So the analogy that I use sometimes is, so in economics, we have the price mechanism. So the price of something is sort of supposed to signal the quality of something. If it is of a higher cost, it's generally considered to be of higher quality. But for those that have bought random stuff off the internet, just because it's more expensive doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be high quality, right? So there's this aspect of God, I've forgotten his name, but using technology to be able to understand quality better means that we can have a value-based decision, not a sort of price-based decision. So back to my scope of computational design. Computational design has a very, very tight use case at this moment in time, because you're essentially trying to automate aspects of design for a very particular technical purpose, a facade, or it could be a master plan, or it could be this. And I'm never going to say there's not going to be like a simulation to rule them all. What it is about bringing all these simulations together so we can compress or fit more into the time that we have to make a decision. So, for example, if we fix decision you need to make a decision. We're going to give you a fixed unit of a month to make that decision. Technology over time just enables us to make a more considered, a more highly tested and simulated solution. So I think it's more about the next frontier. Just think about all the different computational models we spoke about today. And I guess the last presentation is actually a good example of how we need to bring loads of different simulations together to make better decisions about having better performing design. So sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but it's
yeah, no, absolutely. As also thinking about computational design as an approach for a more systemic modeling.
Yeah. One thing that, so just a little anecdote. So when I used to work at Balfour Beatty, the first thing that I learned that blew my mind was lots of simulation was placed into traffic flow of the solution of the road, of the improvement of the roadway. No simulation was ever made of the impact of the works. So no wonder we get traffic jams and congestion when we have roadworks. We've got these simulation tools and we don't use it for the interim state. So yeah, that's something that it's changed now. I mean, obviously this was sort of nearly 10 years ago, but it's having more lateral thinking about how we use these tools for sort of the interim state, not just simulating the outcome.
Okay, I think Hans, if you have any comments, that would be great. I just want to note that in Hong Kong, time is getting late, and I know Alan will have to go fairly soon. But I would ask you, yeah, if you have any questions for anyone in the panel, please go ahead.
No, not really. Maybe later. What I see is that all the presentations, they have a smell of digital twins. So bringing data together, and you can do that in all phases of from design to operation, engineering, etc. And you can build on all kinds of use cases on them, and simulation and computational design are one of them. What worries me a little bit is that a lot of those initiatives who working on this are not real sustainable. Most of them end with some proof of concepts or stakeholders who not using it anymore. So that's something I want to discuss this afternoon. How can we make this kind of projects and solutions also sustainable? And even the material passport of even then, especially that one, should be very sustainable in the end. Otherwise, it's not long living. Yeah. So maybe a discussion for me in the afternoon.
Yes. Pablo presented something I think very interesting. This more bottom-up approach of adopting the technologies. That it's almost innate in the designers at Hedwig, and I know them fairly well. They are very hands-on. They make things in the workshop, but they're also digitally very literate. They are very highly capable people to operate digital tools and so on, and they come up with all those very interesting workflows. And what I find fascinating is that it doesn't seem to be a bottleneck in the process. They just use it. They just use it and create things. But I just wonder if that approach is sufficient, because it is perfect for what Hedwig does, but it's not. I mean, if you change the context or the scale, you might get a lot of problems. So Pablo, you are there, Pablo. So yeah, this is a question I think for you and Neil and Hans and Alan as well. It's a comment and question.
Yeah, well, maybe I can start okay. Since my name was part of the question, embedded in the question. So I believe first is true. It's the whole reason about us kind of doing what we do in the studio is to help the studio to actually deliver amazing design. So you know, it's inevitable. You know, so we have to do it in order to do what we do, and that also means that it's kind of highly tied to our design or way of design in a way. You know, it's tied to our mission. But that doesn't mean that it should end there. It's interesting to see it as a potential, I would say, opportunity more than missed opportunity. I think what is very interesting about tooling in general is that you can hack them, right? So you can use a tool that is supposed to do something completely different. You know, and so if you find a good workflow that works at a specific kind of design stage, and you want to test it on site, you know, to do something completely different, or, you know, after the building is completed, you know, even better. So I don't see it as either a bottleneck. Neither a bottleneck nor a missed opportunity, but rather the opposite. I think it's an opportunity to actually open these things to everyone, you know, and really try to make them work at a different scale or for a different purpose. But I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Anyone who agrees or disagrees or comments?
Just a question. I mean, there's a lot of experimentation in a way in the work process, and the question is like how decisions are made in terms of kind of like deciding, okay, this is good enough, or I mean, okay, this is it in a way, because there's experimentation and iteration are part of the design process, but there's deadline, there's resource kind of category as well. So there's client deadline, there's resource in terms of the office as well. So it's quite intriguing to see. I mean, at the moment we see a lot of the iteration, kind of like the tool side in a way. But what is the decision process that is as well happening? Is it digital or is it kind of discursive, deliberative? So that's kind of something would be interesting to know a little bit.
Yeah, what I find admirable is the adoption process at that particular practice at the studio. They pick something up and they run, and they use it, and they use it very effectively. When you're dealing with a much larger organization, so I'm dealing with a much larger organization at the moment, what normally would take for a small practice or a medium-sized practice to adopt, you know, like a couple of days, a week to adopt something and say, okay, let's do something with this. For a much larger organization dealing with a technological legacy can take 6 months or 1 year. And that is, I find, is mind-boggling. So for example, to deploy a accommodate environment for BIM at Heatherwick, when I was assisting Thomas, we did it in 4 or 5 days. We had the CD up and running, right? For the organization I am at the moment, it took almost a year. So and for good reasons. I'm not saying there are no reasons for that. I attribute this to scale and the digital technologies literacy. I think that plays a major role. But I just wonder if there are other things that we are not considering or not thinking about, especially when we talk about enterprise architecture and systems engineering, because you could design that adoption process. You could model or use something like a BPMN or some other process modeling, because those process modeling languages, they are there for that as well, you know, Archimate and so on. So when we scale it up, are there things we are not considering, and we are not considering because we know they are there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think also the point about decision making that Alain was mentioning, because I think digital technologies in general are really good at I think presenting us with very clear and understandable data. Or at least, it opens opportunity to actually visualize it clearly. But that does not mean that it may be making better decisions that you made. And especially when you work in a realm where not only is digital, but also has a physical side, like architecture, for instance. There are parts of the process that are intrinsically physical. So the fact that we have to review mock-ups, it's very telling. So it doesn't matter if the U values are completely sorted, and G values are completely sorted, in a facade, and all the materials, are packed into a beautiful data set that is going to carry on with the life of the building and so on. If the actual physicality of it does not meet the criteria that you are applying to the building, and that criteria is broad and wide, and maybe answering not only to one particular side of this, So, I think we've been discussing a lot of sustainable side, of this, and is crucial, But there are other elements as well, and I think through conversation, through having a human factor, I think is still very important, So I think it's more about, still about a collaboration between both, I think the digital side and the physical one.
Right. I'm noting the time. We will have to conclude this, otherwise we will not have a lunch break. So let's conclude this session. I think, Neil, you have to go as well. Unless you don't have any final thoughts, we can close the session. I think this was just brilliant, and I love the diversity. And Hans, if you're okay with that, we can come back at 1:30 or a little bit later, if you're okay with that.
No, 1:30 is okay. We have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
To take some lunch. For me, it's okay. Yeah.
All right. So I'll see you at 1:30. Thank you very much again, Alan, Hans, and Paolo, and everyone from Allison Morrison's. And I'll see you later on. Thank you very much.
Okay.